This tutorial will focus on using Mimio Studio Notebook to create an interactive lesson. It will be broken up into several smaller tutorials, each one demonstrating a different technique. Specifically, this one will show you how to have students identify the parts of some object. So go ahead and open up Mimio Studio Notebook from your desktop. When creating an activity in Mimio Studio Notebook, you want to think about everything in terms of layers and movable versus lockable items. Everything you bring into Mimio, whether it's a text box, a shape, a line, an image, and so forth, can be moved or locked into place. And whatever you bring in will automatically be placed on top or in front of whatever was on the page before it. You can also group the objects together to make one item. So you want to typically build your page from the back towards the front. So very quickly, as you look at your screen here, this square box is your page. You have thumbnails of all of the different pages that you're working with. These are your tools, your menu bar, and if you go to the tools and select this little icon here, that will open up what we call your Mimio Studio Gallery. We're not going to work with that right now, so I'm going to close it down so that we have a lot of space to work with. I'm going to open up an existing folder that I already have created, microscope parts, and I'm going to show you a quick activity. You pull out the objective so students know that they're going to demonstrate their ability to identify the parts of the compound light microscope by dragging the parts from the box to the leader lines, and when they're done they're going to check their answers by pulling tab 2 to the green circle. So they put that away, they grab the parts, they line them up according to where they belong, and when they're all finished they pull the tab over and they check their answers and determine whether or not they're right or wrong. And you can see that I line up, and the 2 that I drug over, I was correct. It provides them with immediate feedback so they know whether or not they need to study some more and spend time learning things. So how do we go about creating this particular activity? Well, I went ahead and got myself set up a little, and I already copied and pasted this image from a worksheet that I had into this slide. And so I can resize it, I can move it around. It probably came in pretty small, so I'm going to get it where I want it. And now you're going to want to lock that down, because as students are moving their terms around, you don't want them to be able to move that microscope around. So you can do that in one of 2 ways. You can right-click your mouse and lock it, or you can go up to Format and lock it from there, but I already locked it, so I can't do that option again. So that's locked. Now you can see that no matter what I do, click on it, it's not going to move. If the diagram or the object you chose doesn't have leader lines, then obviously you would have to add them. So to show you how to do that, this little rectangle here, if you right click on it and select line, you can select a line with an arrow or without. I would just select a plain one. And this area here will select your color of your line, and I'm going to keep it black, but I'm going to make it thicker by sliding this little tool a little bit to the right. And I'm going to bring my line in again, and now my line is there. And I would go back to my selection tool, I would right click on it, and I would lock that into place so that it wouldn't move. However, I don't want this on my picture, so I'm going to select it and delete it. And I would just go through that process, and I would add as many lines as I needed for my diagram. Somewhere on your page, you're going to want to create an area for a word bank. So I'm going to take my little line, right click that, and you'll see all these different shapes. I'm going to select a rectangle. I want a black outline with a pretty thin border. I want my inside color, notice how my green box just lit up, with a yellow fill color. And now I can create that. Go back to my selection tool. I want to bump it over just a little bit to my left. And I want to right click on that, and I want to lock it down as well because I don't want students dragging it as they're moving words. I want to add a text at the top. I want it to say microscope parts. I can highlight my text. I can change the color of it. I'm going to leave it black. I can change the font size and the font. I'm going to leave it right where it's at. Now, I want this to also be locked down because I don't want them moving that label. Now I'm ready to start adding the parts of my microscope. Go back and grab the text tool again and start looking at all the parts that you need to label. One of the parts that I need to have students label is the base. If you want to center that within your box, go ahead and center it. I'm going to make these blue, dark blue. And I'm going to actually use my keyboard to Control C and Control V several of those terms into place. And now all I have to do is edit them, revolving nose piece, I'm just double clicking my mouse in order to get back into edit. The eyepiece or the ocular lens, the arm, etc. And I'm not going to show you every single part of the microscope because obviously you can figure that out. Now notice, I'm not locking down any of these pieces because these need to be able to get drug by the students over to the correct position on the microscope. Okay? And you would actually want to do that. Create all your terms and put them over on the correct place on your microscope, and I'll show you why in just a second. At this point, we're ready to create our pull down directions or our objectives, and you're going to do that by selecting your rectangle. Again, you right click on that little box to get that rectangle to float up. I'm going to select an internal color of green this time. That's where I want my directions. I'm going to put a text box inside of it that says the student will be able to blah 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 blah, and you would type your directions there. I also want to add an arrow, so I'm going to right click, lines, arrow with an end, and I want this to be really thick. I'm going to come off the end and pull it out. It's not quite as thick as I wanted it to be, so I'm going to delete it. I'm going to go back to my arrow with an end. I'm going to slide that all the way over and try that again. There we go. Okay. I'm going to take a text box inside of that. I'm going to highlight it and make those letters white so they're visible on the black. I'm going to slide my mouse over so that everything lines up. And now I'm going to hold down my Control key while I select all 4 of those items. And now I just let it go. I'm right-clicking somewhere on that group. I'm finding group and I'm hitting group. And now I have one slidable object. I'm going to slide that across, and now the students know to pull that out. There's their objective. To create the actual answer key, you're going to want to go up to your menu bar to where it says Insert, right up here, and enter a duplicate page. You'll notice that in your thumbnails, a second page occurred. Click on that third page, and now you're on an extra slide. And at this point, click on rectangles. You want your inside color to be clear, nothing in it. And now make a box big enough to go around all of your terms. Again, hold your Control key after you've gone back to your selection. Select that and all of the terms that you have placed. Right-click it and group it. And now that moves around. If you slide it, watch what happens. If you can see that, I can actually see it on my second thumbnail. Let go, go click on your second thumbnail, and now you see this moving around. Slide it over to your left, go ahead and right click on your box, make a line with an arrow, slide that over, make it big and thick, and now you have an arrow. Put the number 2 in it. And hold your Control key. Make sure you go back to your selection. Select it, select your arrow, select your box, right click, and group that as an item. And now you'll be pulling out your answers. Okay? What you want to do is you want to get that lined up so that the answers go over the top of one another. I go back to my shapes, grab a little circle. Again, make sure that your outside color is pretty small. Pick whatever color you want. And I put a little dot right at the end. Go back to your selection tool, and now you can slide the answers off. Grab all of your word parts, put them back in random order, and hit Save on your menu bar. Everything will be saved so that the next time you come in, kids pull out the objectives, they know what they're supposed to do, they move the pieces over, and they can check their answers, and the activity is finished.